So I guess what I'm telling you and your audience is you cannot trust any computer model of the Kennedy assassination that is based on the data as published by the Warren Commission, period.
It's faulty.
It's faulty. And if you're off, on something like that, if you're off as much as an eighth of an inch somewhere, it'd be, it's going to be 30, 40 feet out somewhere else. So you just can't trust those. Now, the second thing is, and nobody knows about this because this took place in Japan, and the only reason I know about it is because I happened to be involved in their documentary a couple of years ago. Again, about the same time that Peter Jennings presented his ABC documentary on the Kennedy assassination, there was a 2 to 3 hour documentary produced in Japan for one of their television networks, Asahi. And they came over and interviewed me and a lot of other people. And they, too, did a computer model. And just to show you how screwy it can get with the computer models, in this documentary, they went to Poland and computer experts in Poland. They went to computer experts at Scotland Yard. They studied all the data, and they concluded that there were at least 4 shooters shooting.
Oh, my God.
Okay?
4?
So see what happens? But one of the items that they brought out in this Japanese documentary blew me away, and I think it will you too. They first sent me a copy of their documentary in Japanese, and I thought what I was seeing was what I was seeing, but since it was in Japanese and I don't speak Japanese, I wasn't certain. But then later they sent me an English translation, and sure enough, here's the story.
All right.
They found a man in California who'd been a friend of Jim Garrison's, the DA in New Orleans, that prosecuted Clay Shaw, and had obtained from Jim Garrison a clean, pristine copy of the Zaprueder film.
Which we have not seen.
We did not for 15 years. Okay? And in fact, would not have seen it maybe even today if it had not been for Jim Garrison. He subpoenaed the film from Time Life. They fought it, I believe, all the way to the Supreme Court. And they said, no, this is a legitimate subpoena. You have to turn over the film. And that's how it became available, because once Jim Garrison had it, some of his people made copies, other people made copies, they made copies of the copies, and it finally was released to the American public.
So he had the originals, Jim, or even a copy of an original?
He subpoenaed them, and it's my understanding he got a second or third generation copy.
But with all the frames in it?
But with all the frames in it.
Oh.
Now, for any of those of you who have seen the Zaprueder film, or you may own a copy of the Zaprueder film, including the latest DVD that's supposed to be the retouched, refurbished,
enhanced
version, you will clearly see a splice that takes place just as Kennedy disappears behind the Stemmons Freeway sign, just as the shots were being fired, but some frames before the fatal headshot. And you will see that he's sitting on the edge of the car, his right hand's up, he's waving, he's kind of looking to his right, everything seems to be okay. And by the time he emerges from behind the Stemmons Freeway sign, his hands are clutching to his throat, and it's clear that he is showing some stress and that he has been hit by at least a bullet. Now, the splice appears just as he goes behind the sign. We've known about this for years, but we didn't understand. I think Time Life tried to explain that the film was damaged in processing. And we knew there was a frame or two or so missing there.
Right.
But nobody knew why, okay? My suspicion was that they had simply edited out a couple of 3 frames just to tighten up the time sequence to try to make the 3 shots in the 5.6 seconds work. 5.6 seconds, okay? But no. The Japanese, when they got this Zaprueder film that did not have the splice, found something quite different, and then it was confirmed when they went to a fellow in Dallas, and he too had an unspliced version of the Zaprueder film, and it confirmed what they had found there, and that is the frames that are missing are the frames that show a bullet striking the sign. One frame, the back of the sign's totally clear, and the next frame, bam, there's a little bullet hole in it. Oh. George, this is confirmed by the witnesses that there. Several of the witnesses said they thought a bullet hit the sign. Okay, but we'll never be able to prove this because sometime, either before or shortly after the year 1964 began, someone took that sign down. It disappeared and has never been seen since. And we have checked with the Dallas Street Department and with the Texas Highway Department, and they said they're the only ones who legitimately could be handling that sign, and they said we did not take it down.
And that would have at least confirmed then what? 2 possible shooters?
What it would confirm is there's another shot.
Yes.
Okay. Now the House committee said there were 4, and this bullet strike on the sign makes it 5. And of course, I think most of the researchers would concur that there's actually more than that, because Gene Hill saw a bullet strike the pavement in the street just ahead of the car, and in fact, Sheriff Decker said the same thing. He saw a bullet kick up dust and concrete in the middle of the street. So there's 6 shots. Okay,
and it was hard enough to believe that Oswald got 3 off.
Exactly, that's 3 shots from one rifle in 5.6 seconds is pushing it to the limit. Most people haven't even really accepted that, but in fact they've tried for years to prove that that's possible. And I think the latest attempt was about a year ago that aired on the Discovery Channel from some guys down in Australia, and they got the same type rifle, but they put a modern scope on it, and they got it on a tower, and they taped it to where it was absolutely steady, and then they got these 2 body forms filled with gelatin and positioned them just the way they thought they ought to be, and they said, see, we can show that one bullet could pass through these 2 men, and that, of course, is true, but even they could not duplicate the shot that they said Oswald did.
In 1960 technology, Jim, how would this have been done? Let's say they had that triangular shoot, 3 people.
Right.
Would they have been hooked up with some kind of radio or walkie-talkie, and somebody said, go, and then they all fire at the same time?
I think that's exactly right. I think that, in fact, we had a man who came forward during the Garrison investigation and claimed that he was one of the radio operators. And we've also got a picture of a man that appears to be holding a walkie-talkie type device up to his head. This was came to be known as the dark-complected man who was standing there by the Stemmons sign, and just as Kennedy passed, he raises his right fist up in the air, and a lot of people have suspected that he was some sort of visual signal man, signaling that more shots were needed. And then he sits down on the curb, places something up to his face, and you can see a wire and antenna sticking out from behind his head. And of course, if they use radios, then we don't have 3 shots, we have 3 volleys.
Exactly. Stay with us, Jim. When we come back, let's talk about a motive for the assassination. And some of the things that Jim will tell you may shock you. I'm George Norrie, back in a moment on Coast to Coast.